people's interests, and it's also in the interest of those businesses.
I must thank the Home Secretary and colleagues for their cooperation, as a result of which, in 40 minutes of backbench time, we managed to get through 44 backbench questions and answers. It shows what can be done when we put our minds to it. Before we move on, well, I'm always grateful to the honourable gentleman for his unfailing support, and I heard what he said. Point of order, Mr. Ed Balls.
Mr. Speaker, I of course commend your chairing. I'm tempted, given that we've just witnessed a U-turn on a U-turn, I'm tempted to ask whether you might allow the Home Secretary to start again, but I fear that that might be ruled out of order. On a more serious point, can I ask, did the Home Secretary contact you today about the leak of her statement to the BBC? Did she give an explanation to you of why the statement was leaked to the BBC? And do you think it would be appropriate for her to explain to the House why the details of her statement were leaked to the BBC this morning?
You know, I sometimes wonder whether these generous initial remarks are a ruse by members to get me on their side. But I'm grateful to the right honourable gentleman anyway. I think what I would say very straightforwardly is this. I was not contacted by the Home Secretary about the matter to which the right honourable gentleman has referred. He has made his point with force and clarity. I am always concerned that the House should have and hear key announcements first. What I would, however, say is that when different numbers are being bandied around, that is sometimes a sign of a matter for debate rather than a point of order. However, I will keep my eyes and ears focused firmly on these matters because the House must hear first. If there are no further points, does the Home Secretary wish to? No?
To make the point to Mr. Speaker, as you indeed have more or less indicated, that I think the right honourable gentleman, the Home Secretary, indicated that the information... Shadow Home Secretary... 13 years in opposition, I'm afraid. After 13 years in opposition, as you'll discover, you soon, sometimes make these mistakes. And Mr. Speaker, that in fact the information the BBC had was wrong, but I am happy to say to the House that actually any information that was there from the BBC first thing this morning was nothing to do with the Home Office.
I'm very grateful to the Home Secretary for what she said, and I'm glad that we're not going to suffer an identity crisis for any length of time. But what I would simply say to the House is I think that we'll leave it there. We've had an exchange, and concerns have been raised, and the Home Secretary has made her position very clear. If the honourable gentleman has an unrelated, totally unrelated point of order, I'm happy to hear the honourable gentleman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Point of order. Where the BBC may or may not have got the Home Secretary's statement, the smaller parties most certainly did not get a copy of the Home Secretary's statement in advance of the statement today. We have been pretty good at getting statements recently. Can you ensure that the smaller parties, like the Labour Party, get a copy of the statement in advance of the statement being delivered?
What I would say, insofar as I could fully hear the honourable gentleman, and I apologise if I failed to him, there was quite a lot of noise in the chamber, I'd simply reiterate that there are certain requirements of courtesy of ministers. Generally speaking, those requirements are complied with, and I know it is always the intention of ministers to do so, and generally speaking, that does happen. If it didn't in this case, that is a mistake, and I think the Home Secretary is nodding her assent to that proposition. Hopefully it won't happen again. The right honourable gentleman from Morley and outward is insatiable today. Point of order.
To say, Mr. Speaker, that having heard the Home Secretary's remarks, I fully accept that it wasn't her or her department who made this leak. And I hear from you saying from the chair two things. One, that these leaks are undesirable, but they're even more undesirable if people get the numbers wrong when they do the leaking.
Well, the question of whether it was or wasn't a leak, I think, remains undetermined. All I can say is that I am Speaker of the House, but I am not Sherlock Holmes. And moreover, what I'd say to the right honourable gentleman is that, as usual, he's used his ingenuity to put his point firmly on the record. If there are no further points of order, perhaps we can come now to the 10-minute rule motion.